So as you could just see, we're having another uber windy day, and it's only just begun. So my name is Jill. I walk on Survival Road, and I am always happy when you join me here. And today we need to do a little inside video because we can't be outside, but I wanted to ask the question, what does it mean when we say love thy neighbor? And I had shared a few videos back. That's really the focus of my own personal journey right now. I really was, the internal journey in terms of God, self, the meaning of life, those little tiny questions as I camp out here in the middle of nowhere in the desert. And for me, it's really shifting to what does it mean when we say love thy neighbor? And that can be, said in a lot of different ways. I only really choose that term because it's the one that's probably most familiar to people when we talk about the idea that maybe we're supposed to. And as you know, if you're familiar with the Bible at all, it does say that that is part of the two biggest commandments. And while this is not based on biblical scripture text, my personal, philosophy with all that is I look into how does the universe work? And that's actually a structured component of how our universe operates. So that's the background that I come from, but that's sort of the abstract, and the practical is what does that even mean on a day-to-day basis? And the reason I wanted to bring that up is that I was having the thoughts this morning about how, what does that mean? How do I show that? How do I do that? And also, aggravation with myself for not being maybe someplace else I think I'm supposed to be. And so then the other little thought came swimming in. It's like, well, if you were already perfect at it, you wouldn't really need to be here now, would you? And I think that's the hard part is we're caught up in what we think we're supposed to be like, and we forget that life is the actual journey. And yesterday I talked about, World War III and famine and, what's actually happening out in the world. And I wanted to follow it up with this video because that is the point of there is a lot happening out in the world, and there always will be a lot happening out in the world. And how do we personally manage it? That was really what the context of the point of yesterday's video was. And today is how do we manage it? Because we can't really do this world all by ourselves, even though I'm all introvert, all like to be alone, all like as much as possible, like to do this all by myself. I don't. I need you in the same way that you need me, and we need everybody. And that brings it sort of under this umbrella of what does it mean to love thy neighbor, and which then takes us to what is the idea of what is love. And I don't want to define love because I think that makes it very complicated. It's something that people need to decide for themselves. But what I will say is it doesn't mean we have to like each other. It doesn't mean that we all have to agree with each other. It doesn't mean we all have to have the same version of what the world is supposed to look like. And in a world that is really polarizing and is becoming increasingly separated along ideological lines, where does love thy neighbor fit in? And I always say there's a big difference between do I want to live with you in my house, or can I live with you in my community, or do we need to live with each other in different states with definitive boundaries, or countries with definitive boundaries? And that's okay. We're not all supposed to be exactly perfectly alike. I mean, nature doesn't do that. All you have to do is look at how wildlife works within each other. They don't all like each other, but they don't kill each other 24/7 either. They are able to exist in very, very different ways of being in a complementary way. And that to me is moving closer to what love thy neighbor means. And that's sort of the physical, mental component to it. But the real heart, spiritual part of it is how do we love each other? It doesn't mean we have to like each other, but we don't really spend much time talking about that. You hear people sort of refer to it as an offhand comment, but I think if you think about how you want people to feel about you, Yeah, it's easy to say, you know, I don't care, but it's really hard if people are actively hating you on a regular basis for everything you think or feel or do. And so I think it's a really good question for today and in today's world. And it is the complete underlying basis of where I'm personally going right now is, how do I put that into action? How do I communicate that via these videos, and how do I do that with my own personal choices? And it doesn't have anything to do with ideology or politics or romance or any of that other stuff. It has everything to do with how I believe the universe works, but also the greater purpose. I mean, there was a reason why it came down as commandment number 2. So you don't have to be Christian, you don't have to believe in the Bible, but you do have to ask yourself, why do certain principles continue to repeat themselves? And the oldest being the golden rule: do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Have you ever asked yourself why that's been around for so long? There's a reason behind it. There's actually universal principles behind it. So I just wanted to say good morning. We are hanging out here in the middle of the desert with uber winds, but in the meantime, we're still taking the journey here about how I can more effectively and completely understand and then practice and implement, because ideas are fabulous, but putting them into action is really when the rubber meets the road, as they say. What does that actually mean? I'm defining what it means for me. I challenge you to think about that today and define what it means for you, because that's the journey that I'm taking, and I'm asking you to share with me, is how do we actually love each other in a way that everybody wins? It doesn't mean we have to like each other or agree, because I'm going to tell you that's never going to happen. And it certainly doesn't mean we all have to live in the same house, but we should be able to coexist on a planet. Everything else does but human beings. Have you noticed that? So that is our pitch for today. I just want to say thank you for taking this journey with me, and with that, don't forget to subscribe, share, or support. Links below.